Hello, you're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. Because it's more fun to believe. Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to another experience of Me and Paranormal You. Oh, my goodness gracious. Jessica's back.
I'm
Welcome
back.
back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. I love your podcast, love being here, so
Well,
it's awesome.
2024. This is the way to get it going, I think.
Y-
There's a lot for us to chat about. There's been we do want to talk about the Good Medicine podcast, which is is not gone. It is not forgotten. Uh, it has
Yeah.
been on a little bit of a hiatus for reasons that I think some people already realize who are listening to this show. But so we're going to talk about that a little bit, and then what I really want to get into is when you look at the description of the of the Good Medicine podcast. It's the show's mission is to offer a space for people to come and share their medicine with the listener. But in addition to that, it's in discussion having discussions about the weird path. And now, for people listening, you can't see the words, but we're talking about WYRD, which is a word that I've never really dug into before until before this conversation. And now I'm hooked, I'm fascinated. And you know, it's where the word weird, WEIRD, that we use and that gets used a lot in this world, has come
Mhm.
from, even though the meaning has changed a little bit. So I want to talk to you about, the significance of the original. I believe it's Norse in origin, that maybe, or I think so. Anyway, you can let me know if I'm wrong about that. But I want to know about the significance of the word weird for you, and especially when it comes to undertaking a project like a podcast and putting messages and conversations out into the world, which is kind of a monumentous effort to do such a thing.
Mhm. Yeah, so the word weird, the word weird found me, I think, God, in early 2012 when I was in New Zealand. I was listening to someone who identified as a witch describing on a podcast the word weird and what it actually meant and what its origins were as the fated path, the way your life is going to unfold. So when it came to the good medicine, the whole idea of that podcast, well, it began with me and my friend Brianne, if anyone's listened to season one, just kind of playing and discussing, as we called, coming out of the woo closet, like starting to talk about some of the things that we'd experienced that were paranormal or otherworldly or magic. And then after a year of doing that together, the podcast became kind of solely my platform, and I wanted to shift it a bit towards exploring other people's stories and understanding that one of the strongest medicines we can provide each other is our stories. And the weird path comes right into that because that is the fate. That's the path that we walk in our lifetime. That's the story that we have. So, understanding if you think you're a little bit weird and you don't really fit in with other people, there is purpose and there is cause behind that. That is your karma. That's your life playing out. And through that, you're going to run into the pain, and from the pain and the restriction, the trials, the tribulations, comes what you have to offer other people as something to connect to, something to feel understood and seen. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it does make sense, because the more I think about life, and the more I guess the word would be contemplation.
Yeah.
you know the more I realize that everything is just a story, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like. And
Yeah.
so within this large story are an amalgamation of billions of miniature stories
Mm-hmm.
happening within our own lives, and then kind of zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, zoom out. It's just story on top of story within story within story on top of story. And I think the shared experience is so powerful, I've never
Yeah.
thought of it as medicine before. That's really interesting. The,
Hmm.
it's, we feel compassion and connectivity, we feel community and connection, and
Hmm.
that's through story, right?
Yeah. I think connection is our greatest medicine. I think that a lot of the sickness that we're seeing in the world, both physical and mental, is due to a lack of connection or a lack of understanding that we are disconnected. I think there's a lot of people walking around on the planet right now that aren't even aware of how disconnected they are. And I see that a lot in the people that show up to work with me. There's a reason they come to do the somatic work that I do and facilitate, is because they're disconnected from their body and it's causing illness of mind, spirit, or physicality. Right.
Yeah,
And then
and
through the work that we're doing, we're really unraveling story in that work.
I know, and it's like,
Again.
there'll be people listening and who, maybe aren't into the woo woo, they're not woo woo wild ones, who are like, but we've never been more connected in the history of time
Mm-hmm.
with each other. And that's there's an argument to be made for that, but it's a very specific type of connection, right? That removes the human equation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would I used to argue, but I would put a wedge in there and say, connected or overstimulated? Are we connected, or are we just really getting a lot of information coming at us from people on a screen? Right. There's I don't know about you, but I've like really drastically switched from texting to at least voice messages, where I'll send it so people can hear the sound of my voice. I love like if I'm going to be on the phone, I want to be FaceTiming. I don't I I just can't do the texting anymore. I can't do, there's so much information flying around. I really just can't handle it. But um I wonder, did I cover what you were asking about when it came to the word weird and why it's involved in the Good Medicine Show?
Well, we can talk a little more
Why?
about that because I think it is fascinating about the fated path.
Mm-hmm. And this is interesting because and by the way, for anyone who listened to me when I've been on Ryan's podcast before, Oscar is very much present and did have something very particular he wanted to say to you later. So
Okay.
I'm curious why. Always I asked earlier, I was like, is there anything you want to cover? And he showed me and I was like, oh, okay. Why? No answer. So we'll see what happens. But Oscar once showed me when I was a bit conflicted around the word fate and the word destiny. And I don't know if I've discussed this with you before, but he showed destiny as like the very top of the watershed and the very end of the watershed where the water makes its way back to the ocean. Usually that's your destiny. So say you start in a little stream and then you end up in a river and then here you go and you make your way back to the ocean. The path that water takes is destiny. Your life is going to unfold the way it is going to unfold. That's your karma. Now, your fate is how you navigate the destiny. So he was showing like fate in the word faith, having very similar connections there. So say that your faith is that the world is a dangerous place, people aren't to be trusted, life is scary, and it is not safe. Then the way he usually shows that is like you'd be navigating the river of destiny, like in the shallow areas and hitting every rock and branch on the way down. And then there might be someone who, whatever way their faith came to them, believes that the world is a good space, that we're here to learn, that death is perfectly safe. I don't know who really walks around with that like deeply ingrained, but like a faith that's a bit more freeing and a bit more trusting, you're going to have a better time navigating that river of destiny. That doesn't mean you're not going to hit rapids. That doesn't mean you're not going to hit a drought, but your faith changes how you navigate your destiny. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And
Yeah.
yeah, it resonates. And
Yeah.
gosh, it makes me realize that I've been pretty closed off to other people's fate. Um, as far as like my opinion about what people should be, how people should be navigating their waters. And it's just like, wow. I mean, you're not in their boat, bro. Like, settle down.
Yeah. I think that's really, really hard to do because you see, and instead of touching on like what's happening right now, because there's so much pain in the world right now, but you look at like a character like Hitler, like there was a destiny in that being. and there was a way to navigate it. And I think it was like Rick Doblin, who's like the guy who started the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Medicine or something. He talked about a DMT trip once where he realized that he had been everything that had ever existed, including Hitler, and that it was all unfolding the way it needed to unfold. And I've had those similar experiences too. And I mean, whether that is a concrete truth or not, the idea that everything is playing out the way it should or the way it is going to, and that there is a reason, can make it complicated when it comes to, like you're saying, looking at other people's incarnations. I mean, like, why would you do that? Why would you start that war? Or why would you cheat on that wonderful person? Or like, what is happening to make people do things that hurt others? And I don't know the deep answer to that, but from everything that I've seen and everything that I've encountered on my whying, my questioning, my digging, it's that one, it's more than I could ever fathom, more than I'll ever truly be able to understand, but that it is all unfolding exactly as it's going to.
Yeah, and I get this great visual image when you say the whying and the digging of, like the why is the shovel, and the answer is a never-ending mountain of dirt, which
Yes.
one can never get to the bottom of, or move, or whatever. It is interesting because I think people will wonder about free will, and that's the age-old philosophical question that has challenged the great philosophers from the beginning of time, and the great thinkers about, well, if there is destiny and if there is fate, then what room does free will have? And we kind of talked about that a little bit with the navigating the waters. And can you
Yeah.
change? People are always interested in, can I change my destiny, and
Yeah.
can I alter my fate? And I wonder, with what you've said, if there's any wiggle room on that.
So it's interesting because when I was talking with Oscar a little bit about what was going to be coming up here today, one of the things, other than the interesting message, which I'll give you in a bit, which I don't know if you'll be able to make heads or tails of it, but he seems to think it's very important for you to have this. So the idea that was coming forward and the words that were coming forward were repeating what we have is choice, what we have is choice. And when that was coming up, I was thinking about, like, if we were catching up, like, have I been through some stuff since we last talked? Like 2023 alone was a very interesting year where and maybe we can get into a little bit of the details around this, I really stopped owning that I had choice and started thinking that things were predestined, and that, okay, I was shown, plant medicine will really get you, I was shown this, and it's all coming true, and this must be like what is meant for me, and like just revoked choice, which was very interesting because the number one thing I was shown was, hey, pay attention to the choice. And then I basically feel like I got bamboozled or immediately tested and failed, which is fine. We're meant to fail. That's how we learn. But another thing that this has been years. I've known this for years. This came up with Oscar when I was asking him about. There was a point in time where I really wanted my mom to fully understand where I was at in my perspective. I really wanted her to know what I had gained from psychedelics, what I had gained from therapy, what I had realized about trials and tribulations in life itself. I really, really wanted her to understand me. And it caused like a rift in our relationship for a little bit because I was really pushing. And I was asking Oscar about it, and he was showing, like, okay, like, let's talk about free will. So he showed a circle. And then I think we might have talked about this before, but let's take someone who grew up in a rural area in Vietnam. All they know is their culture, their tight-knit community. So he might show that as like their perspective of the entire space of planet Earth and everything that's here might be like 20 degrees. maybe they've got a 20-degree perspective on the 360-degree wheel. So within that 20 degrees is their free will. They have 20 degrees of free will. Then maybe they get a scholarship or something. They travel, they live in New York, and then they move down to Argentina. Now maybe they're at like 75%. So now that perspective offers so much more space for free will, right? They've got more perspective. So the greater the perspective, the greater the free will. Does that make sense?
Wow. Yeah. That's,
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. Say you were raised in a tradition or a culture that teaches you to hate another kind of person or another group of people. Well, there is your free will within that perspective until you are pushed out through more perspective. But the mind can be quite a strong tool for avoiding and holding tight to belief systems that make us feel safe or make us feel like we're in control.
yeah. And it is, wow. I think about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Me
I mean,
too.
hate is a learned behavior. I think we can see that play out, and we can see the evidence of that. And on the flip side of the coin, love is, it's an innate characteristic, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are drawn to love immediately upon entering
Yeah.
this physical world. And, you know, hate is
Yeah.
not something that we're immediately drawn to.
Yeah.
So it's
I'm so
really,
sorry.
well,
Oscar said, Oscar was laughing. He goes, "Well, ask a toddler." And he's showing like a toddler like raging against the machine. You know how they like rage against the parental structure. The other thing he showed was very like prehistoric people, and one group of prehistoric people killing off an important member of another prehistoric group of people's clan is apparently the word we're going with. And he's showing like hate can be quite natural.
yeah. And I think,
But
I don't
again,
know, I guess that stems from, you know, fear of, you know, running out of resources,
yeah.
and the way people look at resources in general. You know, I think you
Mhm.
can see that play out in the world. I mean, resources just aren't food and water. I mean, it's
Yeah.
space, land, even people are resources.
Yeah.
You know, white supremacists believe that the white person as a resource is dwindling, and
Yeah.
you know that frames their worldview. You know,
Yeah.
Christians view unborn children as, you know, God's resource that is being, you know, taken away, or vice versa, and it leads to a lot of things, right? And
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That's
all
a really
very
good.
it's all very complex, I think, but it is really interesting to think about. And I'm not trying to frame this as a political conversation.
Yeah.
When you think about, but if you look at like a political map, it is interesting how clusters of cities where all kinds of people have to live on top of one another typically have a more, I guess, progressive and liberal point of view, typically, than people who, I guess, I'm not trying to say that they have a limited perspective,
Mhm.
but I think just by a sheer numbers game, typically their perspective is, I guess, it's not as high of a degree when it comes to interaction with, you know, various cultures on a daily basis. Not to be like they've never seen another person from a different culture than theirs, but that makes me, I don't know exactly why that is. um
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's definitely, there's definitely a correlation there. I don't know if it's a causation.
Yeah. And we're looking a lot at like I think when we're talking about this, we're looking a lot at like America. And thinking about like a lot of those rural areas, a lot of the community is focused around the church. So depending on the political, which it shouldn't be at all, the political leanings of the church, you're going to have a lot of conditioning from a young age. But if you were to go into an area in rural Zimbabwe, you're gonna maybe find like the most open-minded, the most welcoming, the most like kind, caring people. I don't know, progressive. I don't know what that would mean in terms of that culture, but like you're gonna find like, as people that live on this continent, a lot of our perspective is quite bound to this continent and what's happening here, right? So again, I would say I'm very happy to have I would put myself at maybe 60, maybe more. He's showing like I could bump it up, maybe 60, 70% open on that 360-degree scale. There's a lot I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. And like that could be like that scale could be like shifted in so many directions. Like looking into like physiology or looking into chemistry or looking like it doesn't have to necessarily be travel, but it's like expanding the views that you can take, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very interesting. But again, I think that's why when we do go to meet other people and we expand our perspective through connection, it is medicinal for us. It helps us open up. It helps us see things in ways that we never saw before. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with the good medicine is this is what I tell a lot of people, including myself, and it's not to pressurize it, but it's if you don't tell your story and there's medicine involved in it, the people that would benefit from hearing it don't get that medicine. So there's something about sharing our stories that is really for the other, so that people don't feel like they're alone, because we share a lot of experiences.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I see what you mean. Let's take a quick break real quick. We're going to throw in some commercials. And just as a reminder, anybody over on the Patreon page can get all conversations and 30-year bonuses, et cetera, without ads. So, no commercials. So we're going to be right back with Jessica. We're talking about all kinds of things. We're talking about fate, free will, perspective. And it sounds like Oscar might even pop in a little bit. So we're going to be right back after this quick break. And we're back. Okay, good. Okay. Either you fast forwarded, you just clicked the little button and move forward a little bit, or you listened to the ads. I'm not sure what the ads exactly were this time, but hopefully they weren't insane. Fingers crossed. So I love this idea. I'm thinking about my percentage on the 360-degree perspective wheel, and oh gosh, I cringe at my own assessment of my number. I hope it's at least 25 25 degrees, but never having really spent much time outside this country, the United States, reading mostly only comedy and or paranormal books, or like new age thinking spirituality books, limits my perspective very much into like my free will is like either it's funny or it's a ghost. These are the only things when we look at the range of my perspective. So that it's really fascinating to think about. One of my goals this year is to be more flexible in all ways, psychologically, physically, and spiritually, emotionally, and I think this ties directly into that.
So it's information from the big guy. He's just showing like to remember that the circle is an analogy. He's showing if we really wanted to deepen it a bit, it would look more like a three-dimensional sphere, and from the center all of these perspectives coming out, but there is an infinite number of perspectives to take, right? But just that free will exists within that. He's showing that a pie graph was the easiest way to demonstrate it.
Okay. Like, okay, Ryan, don't just make it your life's mission to like add more pieces to the pie. Like that's not what living is about.
Yes, he's showing the graph is not the graph does not reflect the data accurately. So that's really funny. I did want to mention a little bit around the idea of choice that we were talking about, and in the ways in which I gave it up, because I do think that right now one of the most important things that we can do, because I think just given the state of the world and the current genocide that's occurring, it feels, and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, I feel real helpless. I feel like there are times when I'm like, should I like get on a plane and go try to help? And then my brain will go, why didn't you do that when you knew about Yemen for a long time? Why weren't you like, right? So there's all this conflicting stuff going on inside of me around choice, but I can choose to, and I do this, and it's a little bit selfish. I do shovel my neighbors' walks on both sides of my house. And then I didn't do it so that they would do this in return. But you know what? I came back the other day, mine was done. So it's like but it's a beautiful thing to choose to care about the community, to choose to care about the people around you. Lately, I've been having to choose to put myself first and not be so available for everyone. But when I was so I think anyone who listened to my podcast knew that Adam was going through cancer treatment, the editor of the podcast, and he ended up passing in the spring. God, one of the best people I've ever known in my life. What a loss. And I've never known someone who he made his passing away so gentle on the people around him. He really prepared, and he was so, he was just, God love Adam. But he went down with me to Colombia, and we did yahe or ayahuasca, because he wanted to prepare and get ready for what I think he just intuitively knew was coming for him. And he gifted me the experience of going down with him, knowing that I was also going through a lot. I had some revelations through EMDR therapy earlier that year around sexual abuse when I was a kid, and kind of like the actual origins of it that threw me a little bit mentally. And I just was not in a good way. He knew he wasn't in a good way. He was getting ready to pass, and like really grappling with the fact that his life was coming to an end in that body. And we went down together, and in this first ceremony, well, I got to like physically see Oscar, so that was great. But again, I wasn't really in the right mood. I was terrified, so I told him to fuck off, I think. I've done that with multiple weird entities on ayahuasca, where like sober or like in not a terrified mind space, I would have been like, oh, cool, an elf. But instead telling them to get lost. So I went through the hardest night of my entire life, for sure, where it got just progressively louder. If you've ever taken ayahuasca or yahe, you know, it can be quite the trip sometimes. And I got basically just shoved out of my body, thrown into this horrible place. I would describe it, if people don't know what the word solipsism means, it would be the idea, let's say if Ryan had a solipsistic perspective, that would mean that he thought that he was the only actual thing that existed, and he was creating everything else around him. That is solipsism. And my God, it's lonely. And I got pushed in there. And so it felt like eternities upon eternities of being the only thing that existed, not knowing why I existed, not knowing how to stop existing. And I was just trying to create meaning. But the moment I would try to create meaning, I would realize that it was pointless and drop it, and it would disintegrate. And I've never felt more lonely, lost, or terrified in my entire life. It was horrible. So while that's happening, there is another girl in ceremony that had a migraine, so she didn't take very much. She told me the next day that the Taita, the healer, who is this wonderful, like 90-something-year-old man, was standing above me pulling these like creepy looking parasitic entities out of me for like an hour. So there was a reason I got put so deep, I think. So anyway, I'm in this space. Nothing's real. I'm convinced that literally nothing exists, but I invented this life as Jessica. I invented all of this stuff, and I invented the fact that South America even exists, and there's a place I could go with a culture that could help me heal. I invented all of it. None of it meant anything. And it was a really depressing place to be. More than depressing. It was completely nihilistic. And eventually, so I have this incredible friend named Sammy, she's a dream walker and a medium, and she's just one of my closest people in my life. So I would keep seeing like people that I knew show up, and I just push them away. And then Sandy came up, and she looked a little bit different than everyone else. And she kneels down by me. She goes, "Hey, what are you doing down there? Do you want to come out?" And I was like, "Huh?" And she never shifted and didn't change. And I like felt her, and I felt our connection. I felt the love that we have for each other in that connection, that other, that deepest word that I could find here, that connection. We need connection. And once I acknowledged her, the medicine started talking to me, and it was like, oh, like, you're ready. Okay, here's what you've been doing for the last few hours. And it showed me this really intricate shape. And it turned it so that it was like a pinpoint, and then it would shift it. And it was like, so you took this tiny perspective of being the only thing that exists and having this horrible time. Now watch this perspective. And as it was shifting, I was going through all of this emotion, and everything was feeling really good. And it was like, okay, do you think you're ready to connect? And then it brought me through connecting to each person in the Maloka, to the doctor, and then it took me into connecting with each person in my family, and then out into people that I knew, and then out into the whole world, until I was just really overstimulated with connection. Then I stood up because I had to throw up very badly. There was no way of possibly standing up before that. That I was not even in my body. And as I stood up, I could hear like people cheering and music, and all I heard was, welcome to the New Earth party. And I was like, oh my God, and I was like, I'm the drunkest person at the party. And then I proceeded to throw up for like 3 more hours continuously. So there was, in these ceremonies, that night was focused on the mind. So that was healing the mind. So that's how sick my mind was. A lot of other people had a great night that night. I did not. But there's that idea of showing, in order to protect myself, how disconnected I was, right? That was all happening out of fear of actually connecting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's
so, yeah.
oof,
And the choice.
it's intense. And I'm curious about, well, here comes my shovel into the mountain.
Yeah. Dig.
The I see a squirrel right now chomping on a nut.
Of course.
Anyway, very cute. But the your mind being as it was in that moment, I'm curious. I mean, because some people listening might be surprised, if they know you, might be a little surprised by that, about how quote unquote like sick your mind was, right? And I'm curious if it's due to you know, are we in a position here where if someone has a very open mind to things, is it more susceptible for other things to get in there? I mean, hours of pulling parasites out of your body, or your spirit, or your essence, or however we want to describe it, that's pretty intense. And
yeah,
you know, so people are always like, well, how'd that happen? Like, why did that happen to you? And you know, these are probably fruitless quests to try to understand the why.
Yeah. So I will say that when I set the intention to come in to that ceremony, I asked, and I have no real problem loving people. I think I've got a bit of a problem letting people love me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I can love strong and hard, and it can be difficult to really let people in and let them fully see. So as I said, I had been through a lot of therapy around finding like the roots of the sexual abuse. So a lot of this protection mechanism came from that deep. And there was a lot when I was throwing up later in the day, night, later in the evening, a lot of information about like when and where my mind structures that were so strong came from. So when that was happening, and I think I lost my track there. Okay. So when I was throwing up, one of the things that I was being told by the medicine was the reason that there was because I didn't drink that much water that day. I didn't know how this liquid was all coming out of me. it was pretty absurd. It was wild. And it was quite like nasty stuff coming out. What I was being told was that my mind was so strong that it had really cut off my ability to feel all that I was holding. So because my mind was so strong, it was really hard to actually let go or touch that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So a lot of the sickness was like not externalized really, but more like holding on to things that were making me sick. I've talked to people about this a lot. Like I've been working on clearing things out for almost a decade, and like I would say like deeply clearing for about 5 years. Like deeply, like actually like intentionally like, okay, I know where I'm going, not just exploring and spitballing trying to get out of pain like I did when I was beginning, because that's why I started any of the spiritual quest, was because I was in a significant amount of pain. So I always tell people like, if it took 30 some years or 20 some years of building this up, it's not going to be cleared out in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like there's layers and there's buildup. It takes time. And the other thing about it is we're never going to have some fully clean vessel. It's a beautiful thing Oscar's been mentioning lately to people, which I really, really enjoy the analogy, is that the work you're doing spiritually, it's not like you are carving out a marble statue trying to get to some perfect image. It's a garden. You tend to it each season. You harvest, you plant, you clear, you rest. There's the garden's never done, right? And you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes maybe you're going to get some weird bug that takes over the whole garden and you have a bad year and you don't harvest much. Doesn't mean the garden's a failure. You're learning, right? So again, when it comes to the work that I was doing, this was just because of the intention that I said of why am I so afraid to be loved? There was the work that came up.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I had the next night, I think I said that I wanted to be of service. Like I wanted to, or I don't remember one of those nights I had mentioned like I would really like to like know how I could help. And that was an incredibly empowering, wonderful, connected, beautiful ceremony. No throwing up, not even a little bit. But it depends on that intention, right?
Yeah.
What are
And
you asking for?
I mean, and people listening, I'm sure, are thinking, wow, what courage to continue on after that first night or after the night of the purge. Like, what courage it takes to go back in after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Adam looked at me the next morning and I can't remember what he said. He was like, "Oh, you look shell shocked," and I was like, "Buddy, I I am." Yeah, yeah, it was a rough one, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I know like him taking me down there, I got exactly what he was hoping I would get. And it's been I that was in January and I've been recovering and integrating since then, and I think I will be for a long time. But choice, I was really shown like, hey, this is you have choice. And like I felt like I kind of had to get pushed down far enough to like for them to peel back the lid off of what was going on and needed to be purged out for a long time. But immediately after that experience, I ended up getting into a connection with one of the guys that was down there that was actually making the medicine. And it ended up being like an interesting connection, but turned really, really bad, really, really quick. Within like 4 months, it was very, very bad. And I just kept trying to stay with it because one of the nights I had been shown that this could be a great thing, but the exact wording was, you can have this if you want.
Hmm.
What did I hear? I heard, this is for you.
Yeah.
Not, you can have it if you want it.
Well, I
Like,
always
let's
want
see what
things.
she
Okay,
does.
very good.
Yeah, yeah. But it was just, there's so much learning in the last year that really blew my brain to smithereens in a good way. And I feel like I'm much clearer and much more solid in my understanding of how I want to show up, if that makes sense. And the thing that I keep telling myself is that my decision and my choice is to let everyone be free, including myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a beautiful perspective. And
Yeah.
I can't help but just seeing the image too when you're talking about, the layers and layers and the protection and things like that. And I just kind of, for whatever reason, the war machine is a thing, right? And like to have a successful war machine, one must have all the ammo and all the armor to attack successfully. And then what does the person, or what do the people who are being attacked do? They try to get all the ammo and all the armor to have more ammo and more armor stops you from being attacked from the thing that's coming for you. And but if you were to examine all of the ammo and the armor side by side, you'd say, oh, these things are equally bad, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
they have that same connotation, but it's their use is completely different when it comes to the
Yeah.
intention of what they're being used for. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just want
Yeah.
to make sure that like it's not a like, oh, why is all this quote unquote bad stuff? It's like, well, that's a matter of perspective, 100%, right?
Yeah. And there's a part of me that, and that old dirty spiritual cliche, I don't like it, but it also has so many flavors and notes of truth in it. I would not be who I am today without that, without all of the pain that I went through. I wouldn't have the medicine that I offer people. I wouldn't be someone with empathetic synesthesia if I didn't go through all the pain that I went through. And then we come down to that destiny and fate thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah,
the
it's
destiny, there's the fate.
oh, that's such a one
And
I grapple with, right?
it's gross. It's gross. And like, not everything's pretty here in this space that we're in. Not everything's
Yeah.
pretty. But again, choice on perspective. If you have the ability to choose a perspective that allows you to reduce your own suffering and reduce the suffering of those around you, why would you not?
Yeah, and it's oof. I mean,
Yeah.
I think about this all the time. The people who are the most empathetic and the people who, seek a life of helping and healing, it's just, typically they've just been, it's just so much shit has been piled on these people. And whether
Mm-hmm.
it's autoimmune disorders, whether it's outside trauma caused by other people from childhood on, and just the most, you know, horrible things. And yet they have this capacity deep inside of
Mm-hmm.
them to seek healing others, and it's to me it's one of the most beautiful things you could ever hope to witness in a lifetime.
Yeah. So magic. So the interesting thing, I don't know how to explain what I want to explain, but it wants to come out. So the idea, what I was talking about giving up my choice, you need to have choice and also understand that everything's unfolding the way it's unfolding. Right. So you got that river of destiny, and then you've got the fate, or faith. So after Adam passed, I thought I had a pretty decent handle on death. I thought, I'm okay with it. People die, death is safe, it's okay. But after Adam passed, like, I had volunteered in hospice for a while. I loved it. After he left, it really shook me to my core. I just I had never had someone what Adam meant to me. I never lost someone in that role in my life, and it really messed me up. And I remember asking and like praying basically to talk to people that had died and come back. And we've talked about this because I always forget that I did that because it wasn't like a very
Oh my
interesting near
god.
death experience. And we can talk about that in a minute. But
Wow, that's so funny. Like it wasn't a
yeah,
very interesting near death experience,
wasn't a
said
very, but I
Jessica.
think I was so young that like the context of it, like it's and like understanding what it means. But I really was like asking and asking and asking, and just like obsessively watching near death experience videos of people that had died and come back, like just trying to find some solace to know that Adam was okay. And lo and behold, I kind of like, when you put it out and then you have to let it go in order for it to show up. So it was through a series of clients. A wonderful woman showed up. She then sent me her sister-in-law, who sent me her son. So I'm working with this, like, it's funny how they all got to me. And her son, who I'm hoping will be interested in being interviewed, he had an experience like that, where he had died, was with his body, was around the paramedics, was experiencing the whole thing, and then he survived it and came 2 months later in the hospital. So it's just interesting how, like, it's choice, it's brutal, but there's still so much magic here. And I needed that person to show up, and the work that I've been getting to do with that particular client has been beneficial to me in ways that I like. I'm so grateful every time we get to work together, just because of the perspective that this young man has.
Well, and it's,
Yeah.
I know we're running, rapidly short on time here. So
That's fine.
I think for people listening, the good medicine will be back at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
one of the things we definitely want to make sure people know is, to keep your eyes and ears open for that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like you said, Adam, who was such an integral part of the podcast,
Yeah.
passed last year. Gosh, it doesn't feel like it's been that long.
No.
Um, and just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful soul. And he
Yeah.
was the first person I was ever able to have conversations about death with, which to me was wow. It was profound. It was a profound.
Yeah.
Those were profound moments.
Mm-hmm.
And being raised Catholic, and just in the Western world where we hide death, literally, we put the bodies underground. We don't talk about it. People get sick. We put them in buildings somewhere. We don't have to see them all the time, where we have to be allowed to go see them by other people. Um,
Yeah.
it's we hide from death, and we hide it from ourselves, our own death. And I think it's such a big stem of so many problems that we face in the world. But
Yeah.
the uh oh god, I mean, what a fun, what a fun guy too.
Oh my God.
So he's
Yeah.
missed every day he's
Yeah.
missed. um
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
Anyway, so the pod's coming back. I love this
Mm-hmm.
idea about stories being, stories through connection being the medicine. And I also think that when it comes to fate and destiny and choice, I get the sense that, I think in the past, I've always been thinking, well, you don't get choice if there is fate, right? And it's something I struggled with growing up as a Catholic kid. Um, but then I'm realizing, well, they're meshed together. In fact, they're not separate from one another. Uh, it, it, is that a thing? Like, there's
I
a very
really,
good question. Is that a thing?
mm, and like, this is just my own personal, and this is the other thing that I've been like raging against lately internally and like softly. It's a soft rage of wanting to see folks define spirituality for themselves and not to tell other people what spirituality is. I keep saying, spirituality is this, spirituality is that. I'm like, no, no, no. What is it for you? What is it for you? Because that's what I've realized is mine is not the same as other people's. And because I have lived the life that I have lived, it will not be the same as other people's. And that's good. That's that part of like, let everyone be free, including me. So I think for me, faith and fate are the same thing. Destiny and faith are deeply intertwined and interwoven, but they are different things. And then choice exists within our faith, right? So, and you can look at faith as a religious word if you want, but to me, faith is your belief system, right? So, and you make choices within your belief system because how could you not? Right? If you do not believe that you could ever achieve something, then you're never going to try. Your choice will be to not try. Right. And there's one thing that I wanted to mention. Sorry, Pam. So for first things first, Ryan, and we can touch on this if you want. I don't mind being a little late for my appointment that's coming up, but he wanted you to have the image of a spinning top starting to slow in the wobble phase, at the deep wobble. And all he was showing is like, know that this is where we're at. We're in the wobble of the slowing of the spinning top. And he was showing that what's going to happen as it slows is it's going to have to be spun again. Apparently that's what the earth is doing. Yeah. It's weird because he's showing it's going in the opposite direction. Like they're going to spin it. And then as we're in like the big deep wobble where it's kind of off of its axis, and then it's going to be spun the opposite direction.
Wow.
Oh, apparently he wants you to have that information. Cool. And then for the listeners, um, I don't know if I'll be able to. Okay, apparently I'm just to talk. So if we consider apparently we're going to call it the dawn of humanity. If we consider the dawn of humanity, we would look at human evolution the same way we look at a person's evolution. So from an infant, we're developing the root chakra age 0 to 1, the sacral age 1 to 2, and like they don't have to be precise, it varies, it overlaps a bit. Solar plexus 3 or 2 3 4, heart chakra age 4, throat chakra age 5, third eye comes online age 6. So where we're at in terms of human evolution right now is he's showing as those years go by, the continuing years of 7. That's why the 7-year cycles, you're continually building on those chakra systems in those years. So right now, what he's been showing is that we are entering in with the age of Aquarius. Heart. We've come from an age, the age of Pisces was a very solar plexus era. Now we're in the heart. So what's happening, and he's showing best advice, is to turn yourself towards the pain in the world and understand that it's okay to have your heart broken wide open. It's okay to open your heart. Yeah. It's okay to feel all the things. Yeah.
That
and he's showing it's going to be
over here.
Yeah. Apparently it's going to be, he's showing it's way easier than running and hiding from it. And it doesn't mean that you have to do something, but it's okay to feel. It's okay to feel and to connect with the pain that's happening right now. And to understand that those are those are your relatives. We're all connected. We're all related. It hurts. Yeah,
it does. It's fucking painful.
Yeah. I'm even like feeling him bring it through it. It's very,
because I'm like, that resonates with me in such a way that is like resonant within the last 24 hours for me.
Yeah. So he's showing, can you be grateful for your humanity? Can you be grateful for your ability to feel? Don't turn it off.
As I'm trying to turn it off right now, so I don't cry on the microphone. I
know.
I mean, it is a thing where, we get lucky to feel so deeply if we're lucky.
That's why we're here.
Yeah,
we got a body to have senses.
I mean, I've even told my therapist on multiple occasions, I'm like, I'm here to cry, and or not. I'm not here to cry, but if you can't cry in therapy, where can you? And I'm like, why am I stopping myself right now from crying in a therapy session, right? And he'll just kind of like, smile, and I'll be like, but it is, so good to feel and to release. And with that comes connection, like we were talking about.
Yeah. And again, one of the reasons I was praying so hard to have someone that had died and come back show up was because I really needed to be talking and connecting with someone who had experienced it. I needed that. They needed assistance integrating it with their body. That's where I came in. I need them to share their experience with me. That's what me and this client are doing, connecting in that way. So remembering, like, as much as we're here to feel, as much as it can be horrifying and incredible and bewildering and magical and intoxicating and in all the things that it is to be here, I do truly believe that it's safe. It's safe. And when we are done in these bodies, which are, if you really think about it, the earth walking on top of herself, every fiber of your being goes back to her. It's a gift to be here and have this experience. It's safe. It's safe because when we're done with this experience, whatever we might be, go on. So that's what I think.
I think that's a beautiful way to put a button on it.
Yeah. I love putting buttons on things.
Yeah. The Good Medicine podcast will be coming back some point in 2024. Yeah. So I will be alerting, obviously, we'll be, letting people know that over here. And, and we're going to have to do another one later because we didn't even get into the NDE and all these other, these ideas I have about that as well. And I'm sure that you have. And so thank you to Oscar for popping in. Oh God, wow. Oscar just kind of rocked the world with both things, by the way. I think I have a decent understanding about the spinning top, the wobble, and then the spin in the opposite direction.
He's laughing. He's showing, it rocked the world, and he's showing the top. Oh. Yeah.
Oscar fucking nailed me again. God.
Yeah. If anyone wants to reach out, especially anyone that might feel like they have medicine they want to offer. My goodness, please reach out. The more stories, the better. That's what the platform's for. You can find me at zen.lasagna on Instagram. And the episode that I do have recorded for the next season, the first one that I recorded is I will call it a heavy hitter with an incredible woman named Beth. And I'm very excited to bring her story forward.
Incredible. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
And as does anyone who even has the slightest glimpse of knowledge about you. So
Thank you,
you're
Ryan.
wonderful. You're a delight as always. Such a bright light. You heal without even realizing it. It's a beautiful gift. So thank you for being
Oh,
on the show, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
okay. I appreciate it so much, Ryan. We'll talk soon.